Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour starring Tom Sherwood. I'm Kojo Nandi. Later in the broadcast, we'll be talking with the U.S. Representative for Maryland's 4th Congressional District, Donna Edwards, and John Whitbeck, chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. But first, Tom Sherwood. He's our resident analyst, a reporter for NBC4, and a columnist with the current newspapers. Tom Sherwood, D.C. Councilmember Mary Cheh is going to be holding a hearing since her committee oversees the Department of General Services over the circumstances that led to the resignation of the cabinet member who's the head of that agency, and Christopher Weaver, and why just after he resigned, two employees there who were involved with 2 contracts were apparently dismissed. Because the contracts did not go to a local certified business enterprise, Fort Myer Construction. One of the contracts having to do with the soccer stadium at Buzzard Point, the other having to do with the Wizards and Mystics basketball facility on the St. Elizabeth's campus.
Well, that's a lot of detail for what is starting to be a very serious political story here in the District of Columbia. Patrick Madden of WAMU, of course, broke the story that there was a lot of high-level hands into the contracting, whether or not it was legal or not, or proper or not. That was Mary Cheh, the council member with oversight over this, has decided that there's enough questions raised to have a full-scale hearing, and I'm told, I spoke to her this morning, she believes she has the votes if she needs to have the special hearing and to subpoena people. She says it just seems unusual, the high-level interest. And when Rashad Young, the city administrator, was on your show, I think Monday,
Yep.
Boy, this week has flown by. He said, well, he got involved. He didn't even know who was involved. He got involved because they had changed the way they had scored these contracts. That,
in his opinion, caused a disadvantage to certified business enterprises in the district.
When I first heard that, I thought that was a pretty good, though bureaucratic answer, that somehow or another these city officials had changed the way they were scoring people, and he was worried about it. Well, it turns out these city officials had changed the scoring on other contracts too. So why was he involved in this one? The city administrator said, well, he didn't know that much about Fort Myer being involved. Well, Fort Myer is hugely involved. It's gotten maybe $1 billion in contracts.
And the reason why it's controversial is that Fort Myer is a major contributor to the
mayor. Yes, they've given money, but they give money, as one of the council members said, look, if you don't get money, if you're an elected official in the district and you don't get money from Fort Myer, you're doing something wrong, because they spread money around to everybody. They want to be, Anita Bonds used to work for them. She's a council member now. So it's not that they're a bad firm or that they don't do good work. It's not an allegation. It's just that why were these high-level hands sticking them into the process, so much so that Chris Weaver, the director of General Services, resigned, and the 2 people under him who were handling the contracts were, because he wouldn't fire them, and then they've now been pushed aside. Mary Cheh says we need to get to the bottom of this, and that might not be the only city agency that will look into this before we are done.
But it is such a complicated issue that getting to the bottom of it will probably take some time on her part. It's a story that we will continue to follow.
I don't think, some of it may not take too long. If she gets a hearing in late September, early October, we may have a nice Christmas unwrapping of what the heck happened.
Well, a source story in the Washington Post today by Matt Zopotowski indicates that the U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecuted former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell has recommended to Justice Department higher-ups that they endeavor to try him again. This, even though the Supreme Court threw the case out, and a lot of people believe that meant that he couldn't be tried again, that it would be double jeopardy. That's not the situation here. It would appear that they would like to try him again, but higher-ups in the Justice Department ultimately have to make that decision.
Well, technically, they make all the decisions if they have to. But, this is a big deal. The Supreme, Bob McDonnell said, I never did anything. I just allowed some access for this guy who was selling his metabolic or anabolic or whatever. It doesn't matter what it was. And so the Supreme Court ruled there was not enough of a quid pro quo to uphold this conviction. And the prosecutors have asked until September 19th to decide whether they're going to bring the charges again. In this Post story, which just broke at 11:30, says the prosecutors, the local Northern Virginia Attorney General, U.S. Attorney, wants to charged McDonnell again that they believe they can show quid pro quo activities between the governor and this businessman. Yes, the Attorney General may have to approve it or higher ups, but this is a significant step. If we thought that the Bob McDonnell case was over, apparently it's not.
Well, let's see what another businessman in the Commonwealth of Virginia has to say about this. Joining us by phone is John Whitbeck. He is the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. He's also an attorney, and he is a small business owner. John Whitbeck, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Kojo, how are you?
Doing well. What is your view of the apparent decision by the U.S. Attorney's Office to once again prosecute former Governor Bob McDonnell?
Well, look, I mean, we didn't really know what was going to happen. And this really, from the get-go, was about destroying the career of a rising star, somebody with presidential-level skills and talent. Nobody's excusing what he did as being, right for Virginia. And there are things that were done that I'm sure the governor regrets, but criminal it is not. And if this is the standard that we're going to measure for prosecution, then Hillary Clinton ought to be the next person tried in absolutely in the same manner that they went after Bob McDonnell, because I think what she's done is the same thing. We have an email that just came out from one of the emails from the State Department where a donor to the Clinton Foundation asks her chief of staff to get them diplomatic passports. So basically, yet another example of pay for play. We'll give you a donation to the Clinton Foundation. You go streamline the process to get us diplomatic passports. Totally inappropriate. And if they're going to go after Bob, they need to go after Hillary at the same time.
Congratulations, John. That was very good at bringing in Hillary. You guys are working really hard on this. I haven't seen you since Cleveland, but congratulations on that. But, Bob, Dave Albo was on this program, I think, last week. It all kind of blur together sometimes. And he said he had the highest regard for Bob McDonnell, that he thought Bob McDonnell, if Albo were to die, he would want McDonnell to raise his children. And he had such respect and high regard for him. And then he said that what McDonnell had done in office was stupid and he should never again get around into or involved in elective politics. Do you agree with Dave Albo?
Well, I tend to not try to agree or disagree with paraphrasing what other people said, but I will tell you that I believe the governor made a bad mistake. He was a terrific governor. I think he would have been on the short list of vice presidential candidates for Mitt Romney in 2012, and then in 2013, if they had not done this to Bob McDonnell, he would have helped elect Ken Cuccinelli governor. So I tell you, this has been a travesty from the get-go, and thank goodness the Supreme Court finally did justice, because it certainly hasn't been done in this case all along.
If you have questions or comments for John Whitbeck, you can call 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream of this broadcast, and ask a question or make a comment. Send us a tweet at Kojo Show or email to kojo@wamu.org. Speaking of rising stars who are governors, your current governor, Terry McAuliffe, is supposed to be one such, and he has decided that he is going to restore voting rights to felons on an individual basis, restoring to some 13,000 felons last week. Republican leaders said they are going to take him to court once again over this effort. He says, this time I did it the right way, individually. It wasn't a blanket restoration. What do you say?
Well, Terry McAuliffe, I disagree with the characterization of him as a rising star. His administration's been an utter disaster. I mean, and this felons' rights debacle has been the largest failure of his administration. I mean, this is individuals who deserve
not Obamacare. You would put that head of Obamacare failure and the expansion of Medicare.
Well,
maybe they're tied. Maybe they're tied.
Well, Medicaid expansion never had a chance. I mean, Speaker Howell and Leader Norman have been very clear. As soon as we held the Senate in 2015, there was no way it was coming. And I think, a liberal Democrat pushing Obamacare in Virginia is to be expected. But nobody expected that hundreds of violent felons and sex offenders would had their rights restored. I mean, people that we're talking about who are still on the sex offender registry, people who are on probation in other states for violent crimes. And this was an absolute disaster. And now his mail merge solution is in contempt of court. And he told us he was going to do it the right way, go about doing it with individual rights restorations, which he has every right to do and should do on a case-by-case basis. But basically what he's doing is the mail merge function. I mean, some word processors, as you all know, there's a function where you can just print a lot of letters that go to different people at one time. He's basically putting a list of names, printing the letters to each one in a mail merge, and sending it out.
He's just an auto pen signature on it or something.
No, he claims he didn't use the
there's
auto
no
pen.
review of the individual case-by-case basis. You know, it'd be and as an attorney, I deal with contempt of court all the time, you know, in litigation. And what you have to prove is that the contempt was willful. In other words, that the person who is violating the court order did so not innocently or negligently, but just willfully, just refused to do it. And his comments about how the Supreme Court was scared and gave in to the pressure, you know, tells us that it's willful. He has utter contempt, pun intended, for the Supreme Court of Virginia because they didn't give him what he wanted. But we have a separation of powers in this Commonwealth, and they told him to do something. They ordered him to do it, and he didn't do it, and now he should be held in contempt.
Well, can I ask you about the presidential campaign? Are you ready?
Talk about it every day.
That's right. Well, you ran a good program there in Cleveland. I have to give you credit for that. You know, people are always at the morning breakfast. They showed up on the floor. They were all good.
Thank you very much.
The polling does not look good for Virginia. We all talked about it being a battleground state, but maybe in this presidential year, as you guys are fighting that campaign and getting ready for the statewide elections next year, it does seem that you've got a very steep hill to climb if you're going to have Trump carry Virginia in November.
Well, I'll make 2 points. Number one, I think up until now, you're right. But there was a Hampton University poll that came out today that showed, actually yesterday, that showed the race within the margin of error in Virginia. So we automatically
from a 14-point margin.
No, but that, yes, and I saw that. I looked at Real Clear Politics today, which has like the last 10 polls in Virginia, and it ranges from the 2%, I think, which is the Hampton one you're citing, to as much as 19. So, so let's say it's somewhere between those two.
I think we don't know where we are, and I'll tell you why. In 2013, they told us that Ken Cuccinelli was down by double digits, and he ended up losing by 2.5 points. In 2014, they told us that Ed Gillespie was down by double digits going to Election Day, and he ended up losing by 17,000 votes across the state. Virginia polling is always a debacle, no matter how you slice it. In 2012, we were told that Mitt Romney was going to win, and he lost. Virginia polling is notoriously unreliable, and quite frankly, if Donald Trump doesn't win Virginia, he's not going to win the White House. So even if he were down 100 points, he ought to be investing in Virginia. He ought to be going full board, you know, because he's got to win here.
But he's not going full bore, and he's not investing.
Well, I would disagree with you on that. I think, you know, Team Virginia has been on the ground since 2015, which is our ground game. As soon as Donald Trump got the nomination, we pivoted from sort of a neutral, just gathering data, to working on his behalf. You're going to see a lot of increase in the number of offices that are going to be open. You know, Hillary Clinton supposedly paused her ads. I watch cable news every day in the morning when I'm getting ready for work or getting ready for my day, and there's an ad on every single day. They have not abandoned Virginia. They know it's a battleground state, and Donald Trump's going to hopefully
it's a battleground state in which the Republicans have not won statewide office in quite a while. What makes you think that it'll be different this time?
Well, we don't know if it's going to be different. I'm not. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, Hillary Clinton could win Virginia. She could lose Pennsylvania. She could lose Virginia, win Pennsylvania. One of those two states between us and Pennsylvania are probably going to decide this election. And I don't think we really know what's going to happen. It's such an unpredictable year. All the rules are suspended. I mean, I just, conventional wisdom is out the window. So
I know that your Virginia campaign, a coordinated campaign that you have going, is doing a lot of the legwork in Virginia that needs to be done. Somebody said Trump has one office in Florida and Hillary Clinton has 50 or something like that. I know that locally on the ground, you guys are working hard because you know that even once you get to November, you've got the statewide races next year. But Donald Trump was in Virginia, near Fredericksburg 2 weeks ago now. I don't know that he's coming back, but he hasn't done any specific advertising that I have been aware of.
Well, Mike Pence was at a rally in Loudoun County earlier this week also.
Yes,
That's
but he's
right.
not
That's right.
Donald Trump.
You're going to see a lot of appearances. We in fact, we're not really to announce the dates, but we're going to have more than one appearance in the next month from the nominee and Governor Pence. And I think really, I mean, these rallies that he does are important. They're great. They get a lot of attention, and he feeds off the crowd, and tens of thousands of people see him. But what really matters right now is the door knocking, the one-on-one in your neighborhood, knocking on a door, convincing your neighbors to vote for Donald Trump, convincing the people down the street that you don't talk to very much, but happen to know they might lean Republican, getting out there, calling them and knocking on their door and talking them into it. That's really what we're focusing on.
May I mention one more thing?
Okay.
Tim Kaine's wife, Ann Holton, she's in Roanoke today campaigning, doing the very kind of thing you're suggesting, visiting people who are going to be knocking on doors and doing calls and all that.
Yeah.
I think you would acknowledge that Tim Kaine on the presidential ballot with Hillary Clinton does make the road a little harder for you, even though you have some criticism of him.
Well, but I thought that was going to be the case, and then I've watched how he has completely compromised his integrity to join this ticket. I mean, give you a good example. Tim Kaine and Mark Warner have always been kind of that Democrat that Republicans can get along with and even vote for. And in an election, all things being equal, they've been very successful in winning these elections in a state that's a purple state. And this election has really exposed Tim Kaine's true character. And I'll give you a couple examples. Number one, his flip-flop on offshore drilling is epic. He used to be pro-exploration for offshore oil drilling, and we've talked about this in the Commonwealth for years. His office even wrote a bill on it in 2006, and now he's completely changed his mind. And his excuse is pitiful, to be honest with you. He says he found out the Navy objected, and therefore he's no longer for it. I think that's just absurd. And basically it shows how out of touch he really is.
And the other issue on which he's flip-flopped?
What's that?
And you said there were at least two issues on which he's flip-flopped?
Well, I'll give you another example of how he's compromised his integrity. This press conference issue, we have not had a press conference from Hillary Clinton in 272 days. Tim Kaine went on the ABC News the other day and said that Hillary Clinton talks to the press all the time, and this is a press conference. And quite frankly, after that happened, a bunch of reporters who saw it on Twitter and whatnot called him out saying, actually, she doesn't, Senator, with all due respect. Now, we've been calling him Weather Vane Kaine, and that's because he sways in the wind. He goes whichever way Hillary Clinton needs him to go. If they need him to lie about her talking to the press, he'll lie about it. If they need him to pivot on offshore oil drilling, he'll do it. He'll do anything he can to be on this ticket. And really, Tim Kaine has been defending the undefensible for several weeks now, and it's pretty sad to see. Especially,
let's make a COJO agreement on this program. We'll make Hillary Clinton hold a press conference if Mr. Trump releases his income taxes. How about that? We can do it at the same event.
I tell you, I think that these politicians, Republican or Democrat, leave them alone on the tax return issue. I mean, this is their private tax returns. I don't care what's in Hillary Clinton's tax returns. I don't care what's in Donald Trump's tax returns. So I think this is much ado about nothing, and this is just an issue that they're trying to bring up, and it's not working because in every poll that's come out in the last few days nationally, Donald Trump's in the margin of error or leading, and I think people need to get off the tax return thing.
Well, I suspect that President Obama would have wanted people to get off the birth certificate thing, but Donald Trump never stopped asking for it.
Well, and I agree with you there. I thought that was a losing argument, quite frankly. So I'm just glad that we're moving on. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about national security, and we're talking about issues. Hillary Clinton's talking about anything she can to distract us from the Clinton Foundation scandal that's now cropped up.
Here is Barry in Baltimore, Maryland. Barry, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I appreciate your time. After 16 years of the partisan politics, I'm an independent, and I'm just tired of it. I mean, there are some good ideas that the Republicans have. There's some good ideas that the Democrats have. When politics politicians just get on the air and just say that everything that's on the Democratic side didn't work when the economy is doing relatively well, unemployment is down, that just undermines your credibility. I mean, it would be great if you guys could just get together and just fix the stuff that needs to be fixed and give credit where credit is due. Obama has done a decent job. Sometimes Bush did a decent job. Let's just fix stuff and move on.
To which you say, what, John Whitbeck?
Well, I think what the caller describes is the paralysis in Washington, because, the old days of Republicans and Democrats coming together for the good of the country are over. I mean, we're increasingly polarized. Everybody's afraid of getting primaried if they get anything done. And, my favorite Republican, my hero in the party was Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp was not only a guy that could reach across the aisle and work with both sides, but he believed in bringing the Republican message of liberty and opportunity to new communities and new voters. And that's really what the party needs to do. We need to be in the inner cities, in non-traditional Republican voter communities, and bring the message to them. And I think that will help a lot if we do that to alleviate a lot of the just disdain that people have from Washington.
Barry, thank you for your call.
Well, one big thing that happened this week, tell me if I'm right, because I was away for a few days, in getting ready for the primary, getting ready for the elections next year, your party, the Virginia Republican Party, voted, what is it, the executive committee, I'm not sure the exact title, voted 41-40 to hold a primary next year rather than a convention. Some people were complaining the convention just attracts too many hardcore conservatives and doesn't give the Republican Party enough of a base in the state to win in the general election. What does it mean that you decided to have a primary and not a convention?
Well,
did I characterize that right?
We decided to have a primary, and I'm an all of the above kind of guy. I mean, I believe that you look at the election in front of you and you select the process that best fits how to get these candidates elected. And in 2014, I supported a convention because Ed Gillespie was going to be outspent 10-1 by Mark Warner, and it helped him save money. In this particular instance, though, one of the things that I think was on the mind of we call it our state central committee. In this year, in 2016, we held a primary, another close vote back in 2015 to select it. And we had over 1 million people show up. It was the largest turnout in a primary, Republican or Democrat, in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think with the success and the data that we got from that, and the openness, the participation, everything that was good about the primary in 2016, I think the folks that in the majority that voted for it really wanted to try to copy that model. And I think that's why you saw a primary happen.
And if
supporters of the convention say there was a gentleman's agreement that was reached last summer for the sake of party unity and to ensure that only Republicans select the party's nominees. They apparently feel betrayed. And Virginia does not have party registration. So I guess what they're thinking is that Democrats will be voting as spoilers in this primary, as some have suggested. What do you say to that?
There's not really any data that backs up that there's a significant turnout of Democrats that change the outcome one way or the other. I agree with them in spirit. I mean, I support party registration. I wish we had closed primaries, but we don't. But I think when you weigh that versus the advantages of a primary, it helps our candidates get their ground game going. In fact, I was talking to Ed Gillespie yesterday, and I asked, how does this change your campaign? And I always check in with all the statewide candidates, ask them how it's going. And Ed, made that point. He said, look, it allows me to get my ground game going. I'll have my people on the ground earlier than I would have. Because when you're talking about preparing for a convention, what you're doing is you're going out and you're getting delegates, and you're talking to a very small group relative to what you'd be talking to in a primary. You're not getting name recognition statewide. You're not having people on the ground knocking doors, which is what they're going to have to do. Now, you save a lot of money and you get a lot of volunteers out of your convention, but you're just not ahead of the game like you are when you're doing a primary. And with the Democratic primary on the same day, it's going to be interesting to see which side turns out more voters to vote for their nominees.
Very quickly before we go to the phones, is this a done deal, or after November could the state party change its mind and go back to a convention, or is it a done deal now?
we can always change the process if we choose to, as long as the deadlines with the State Board of Elections haven't passed. But I can't imagine, and I certainly, it's not going to be on the agenda for me. I mean, we need to move on, and so I don't think you're going to see any change.
Here is John in Bethesda, Maryland. John, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Kojo. I think I heard your guest state that it was not a big deal, the fact that Mr. Trump has refused to release his tax returns. I just could not believe that I heard him say that. Mr. Trump is asking us to trust him with the presidency of the United States of America. The least he could do is trust us with what he's done up till now, at least financially speaking. We need to know what kind of financial relationships he's had, both domestic and international. And there again, he kind of based his campaign and launched it on the fact that he was rich.
Okay, allow me to have John Whitbeck respond.
Yeah, I just don't agree that the tax return issue. I mean, I don't really really care what's in a candidate's tax returns. It's just never been an issue for me. I know a lot of people feel that way. Like,
well, every candidate has done it since the 1970s.
Even Richard Nixon.
So what? I honestly, just because this is 2016, this is not even, this is not even 1968. This is a crazy election, or 1964. This is a crazy election. We
agree. Everyone agrees about that.
That's right. It's nuts. I mean, the rules are suspended, and so I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen in November. And to have two candidates with negatives that we have before us. I mean, in Virginia, that same Hampton poll that we talked about, both of them were over 50% in terms of an unfavorable opinion of Virginians. And that's a failure on the part of the campaign and the Republican Party to sell the brand that Donald Trump brings, and I'm be the first to admit it. But on the other side, when you lie and are embroiled in scandal your entire political career, you are going to be over 50% unfavorable. And, for her to be only a point or two up in Virginia and a point or two up or a point or two down nationally, considering all the media attention on every little thing Donald Trump does, is a disaster for Hillary Clinton. They need to be blowing us out right now to win this election, and they're not doing it.
Congratulations for bookending the show. Your appearance with Hillary at the top and the bottom. You certainly earned your title as chairman of the party. Congratulations.
John Whitbeck, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. John Whitbeck is the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. He's also an attorney and a small business owner. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
He has his finger on the state of Virginia. And obviously, he was talking in a partisan way on some of that, but he has done a very good job of knowing what's happening in the state of Virginia.
Well, that's his job, and
not everyone does their job well, Kojo.
Joining us in studio now is Donna Edwards. She's the U.S. representative for Maryland's 4th Congressional District. You can call 800-433-8850 if you have questions for Congresswoman Edwards. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch the live video stream of the broadcast there, send us a tweet at Kojo Show, or email to kojo@wamu.org. Congresswoman Edwards, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It's good to be here, hear that previous conversation.
Governor Larry Hogan and Comptroller Peter Franchot agree that schools in the state of Maryland should not open after summer vacation until after Labor Day. The government has put out an order to do that, both in Prince George's County and in Montgomery County. Schools open before Labor Day, but the governor says that, we need to make some money in our oceanside resorts. This is not working, to which you say.
Well, I think that we also need our young people going to school as many days as they can get in so they can get the kind of education they need to compete in the 21st century. And so I think it's worth a debate and a discussion. And there is a way, frankly, even school systems that open after Labor Day for them to get the requisite number of days in that are necessary. But I think it needs to be a discussion in our state. Look, I went to school year round at some points in my school career. And so I think as many days as we can get students in school, in the classroom, in a learning environment, then that's going to pay off for us in the 21st century.
Tom, here's what an email we got from Joe in Rockville says. Our governor wants to improve the economy and give everyone a beach vacation by delaying school openings. Great idea we can build on. Let's close school in March to get the kids to the beach earlier and more spending. Maybe we could expand the winter break too. Deep Creek is great in winter and all that spending would be good for Maryland. Maybe we could just close the schools, save tax money, and get the greatest possible increase in spending.
Well, in Virginia, it's called the King's Dominion rule because a lot of young people are employed there. And it is not just the idea, that was nicely read by you. It's not just the idea of people have time to have leisure activities. There are summer jobs involved, and there are families where the children and people do depend on summer jobs, and so that's an issue. But with this Senate leader Mike Miller and the House, always get his name wrong.
Michael Bush.
Speaker Michael Bush. Have both said this is, you can debate this, but it should have been decided in the legislature, not by executive order. Do you think Governor Hogan overstepped his bounds by doing it by executive order?
And what role do you think educators should have in this discussion?
Well, I think all of those, entities ought to be at the table. Our educators, our governor and comptroller, and also our legislature. But so I don't know that I wouldn't necessarily rule out the idea, but I do think that it has to be a real discussion. And also, how are we going to make sure that we get the number of days in school if we start school early? So there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and I think the governor would do well to make sure that he's on the same page with the legislature.
David Cox, who's the Allegheny superintendent, and he's head of the statewide organization of superintendents, said this is a mistake for Maryland's children because it does just what you suggested there. It squeezes the time period in that Christmas, holidays, religious holidays, and some spring breaks and all those may have to be squeezed, and there's time for bad weather that may not be there if you have to squeeze the 180 days. Or
you can add days. I mean, there's nothing magic about, there's nothing magic. What really, we should be focused on is the number of days that students need to be in classroom and in a learning environment, and then figure out ways to spread that across the calendar. And so I think it's a legitimate discussion, but I don't think it necessarily means that just because you start after Labor Day means that all of a sudden, the number of days are off the table. No, we'd have to add those days because that's what's really important. What are kids
maybe
learning,
even longer
and how
days.
much time do they have in classroom?
Maybe even longer days.
Look, as I said,
Everything.
I went to school year round in some of my education. You know what? I actually loved it, and I didn't lose time on the summer end because we were in school year round, but we had, discernible breaks. I think there are all kinds of ways to do this. And you know what? Parents need to be at the table too, having that discussion, because it impacts the way that they're able to organize their lives as parents and as working people to make sure their kids get the education.
If you have
need.
calls or comments for Congresswoman
reasonable.
Donna Edwards, call us at 800-433-8850. We haven't spoken with you since the Democratic Senate primary back in April. You have been outspoken since your loss to Representative Chris Van Hollen. In your concession speech, you noted that Maryland could be sending an all-male delegation to Congress and almost all white. Why does that matter?
I think it matters because it matters in terms of the kind of legislation you work on, what your policy focus is, that we have a truly representative democracy. I've been working with organizations around the country trying to increase representation of people of color, of women. We have 42,000 elective offices all across the country, and a very, very small percentage are held by women and held by people of color. And we need to change that. And Maryland is no different than other places. And, that said, we had a primary process. I lost in that primary. I announced some time ago that I'm supporting our nominee. I'm a Democrat. I believe in democratic values. And I think that Chris Van Hollen is going to make a fine senator. That does not absolve us of the responsibility of figuring out this representation question. And I think it's an important question for Democrats to ask ourselves.
And I think that the results were 53-38, and you've made those principled statements. Has Chris Van Hollen acknowledged your support? Have you appeared with him, or has he reached out to you to acknowledge the seriousness of the issues you've raised so that you guys can get on the same page going forward.
I would say that's not been part of our discussion. Chris and I did meet a couple of months ago. Actually, I can't even remember when, but it's been several months ago. I've been very, clear. I use social media a lot. I've been really clear about my support for our nominee, and very clear that we're on the same page in terms of the kind of agenda that we want to bring for Maryland and for the American people. And I also believe that we have to have a change in the in the Senate and that in the House. I've been on the road campaigning since then with candidates all across the country. I just came back from New Hampshire actually for the Hillary Clinton campaign because I feel strongly about her candidacy, and we've got other Senate seats at stake that are not the same as Maryland. I feel confident that Chris Van Hollen is going to win this Senate seat in Maryland. We need to make sure that we can win Senate seats in states like New Hampshire, North Carolina, and other places so that we can have a governing majority in the United States Senate.
And I know people usually ask this at the end of the discussion, but we often run out of time. What's next for you after Congress?
Wow, people ask me that the day after the election, and so I have the same answer for them as I have now. I don't know. I've always been engaged in public service in some ways, whether it's in the nonprofit sector or certainly in elective office, and I will figure out a way to serve. My most immediate and concrete plan is that I have an RV that I will be at my disposal in January for a 2-month road trip to visit every national park in the country. There are 48 of them, and that is my plan.
Oh,
if you can't go to,
I know
if you can't go to Mars, where you want to go,
no,
then you can take a ride off.
People may not remember. What is that exploration to Mars that's been proposed? And you told us on the show last spring or something. You'd be willing to go, but you can't come back.
Well, I'm also still very clear that in terms of our nation's space program, and we've had some ups and downs, space is risky business. I've been the lead Democrat on our space subcommittee in my time in Congress. I spent time working at Lockheed and at NASA before I ever got into, any of this stuff for lawyering. And I feel really strongly that it's part of our 21st century economy. So I look forward to continuing in that work.
Do you think you can get NASA to fix the elevator at the Washington Monument, since the Park Service can't seem to get it fixed?
Well, we have a lot.
If we can't go into space, at least we could go up 550 feet.
Well, I will tell you this on a serious note, though, Tom. I think we're celebrating the centennial of our National Park Service, and our national parks, in terms of their infrastructure, are deeply underfunded.
$12 billion.
And I think that is that's just a tragedy. I know as growing up, I grew up in a military family, and when we would go from one installation to the next, it was our Park Service. We were drivers. My dad had to drive because he couldn't afford to fly children across the country, and we spent time in our parks because they're an important part of who we are. And so, again, another one of those priorities that we can make sure that we have a president and a Congress that's committed to those kind of priorities.
The Head Start issue in Prince George's County shocked a lot of people. Stories of child neglect and abuse lost the county $6.5 million in federal grant money. Head Start will be run by an outside organization this school year. But what's your take on this situation? Do you think school officials were too complacent?
I think this is really shameful. I mean, 932 students who are impacted by this change, and I think it starts at the top. The county executive was very insistent on having the head of the schools, Dr. Maxwell, come under his jurisdiction, appoint 2 members of the school board, and they have failed our children. And I think that when you look at what's happened, it isn't just about one educator here or another educator there. There are deep systemic problems within Head Start that have to be fixed before that grant ever comes back to Prince George's County, in my view. And I think it's important that in the interim we make sure that all those 932 students get to continue in the Head Start program. I mean, Head Start is a program that's just what it says: give kids a head start, and you can't do that by having an environment in which there is abuse and allegations that have led to the termination of this grant. It looks like
6 employees who worked in the county's Head Start program are being disciplined. 3 of them will be fired, according to some sources. But this isn't the first time Head Start has had issues in Prince George's. And like you said, it starts at the top. What do you think took the county executive and the school superintendents so long?
I think we still haven't had a full accounting of, those deep systemic problems. I mean, the report that was issued by Head Start, by the Administration for Children and Families, said that there were problems, for example, in conducting background checks for people who were working with our children, that there were multiple problems of inappropriate discipline, humiliation, abuse, and neglect in the system that were pointed out to school officials, and those were not taken care of. I mean, the Administration for Children and Families, I've worked with them for years, many years ago on some other issues, but they want to make sure that systems can function. They don't want to be taking away grant money. And so to go to this point, after one infraction, another infraction, investigation, no corrective action, deficiencies continued. That is why the program was terminated. The grant was terminated for Prince George's County. Those are systemic problems that have to be fixed. Family service workers not making mandatory reports of abuse when that's the law. That again is a systems problem that wasn't corrected by training. It wasn't corrected by the responsible individuals and agencies. It isn't about several individuals. Good that those people who committed particular actions were terminated, but we haven't yet addressed the systemic problems. That's the responsibility of the county executive, and it's the responsibility of Dr. Maxwell.
That's a very strong statement, and it's right in your wheelhouse of things you've done your entire life. Rashawn Baker is going to be running for governor in 2018. Somebody's going to be running for county executive. This is the politics hour. Would you consider running for county executive in 2018?
I am running to my RV to get on the
after
road
the trip.
to go. And I haven't decided
There'll be
how.
people
No, wait.
pressuring you to do this.
Here's the hard part of her
I
answer.
have not decided how I plan to continue to serve the people of Prince George's County and the people of our nation. And I'm going to be smart about figuring that out. And I haven't ruled out another run for elective office, but that's not what I'm doing right now. And, people know
Was
me
it
as
in the universe?
Well,
It's
people
not as
also-
far away as Mars.
you know what, Tom? People also know me as a straight shooter. And when I
That's true.
decide
That's why
that,
I'm pushing
I'm
you.
going to say it. And I haven't
We
decided.
Is it within
we
your
are being
consideration?
deluged with calls about the school system, so let's do this.
Okay.
Doug in Silver Spring, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I'm just so amused that this idea of summer vacation lasting from June 15th to the end of Labor Day weekend is treated like it's some type of new radical idea. When I went to Montgomery County schools in the 60s and 70s, that was the norm. And it especially amuses me that the adults who advocate shortening summer vacations, they're the adults who already got their share of summer vacations. It's easy to look back and say,
Well,
okay,
you're in
well,
Montgomery County, which is now a majority-minority school system, and there is a lot of concern about how to close the so-called achievement gap. And a lot of educators feel that the only way to do that is by having kids in school for additional time. So it may be a little different to when you went to school in Montgomery County.
Well, all I know is some of the happiest moments of my childhood life was in summer. And I just think it's ridiculous to say that, no, kids can't be allowed to have a lousy 2.5 months worth of summer vacation. It's ridiculous.
Here's Congresswoman Donna Edwards.
Kojo, I too went to some of those schools, and I think that we have to broaden the conversation. It has to be about how many days children are spending in school, and what it is that we're also doing in those summer months that give them other ways to be both productive and to have an educational environment for them during the summer months. I mean, sometimes play is actually educational. And so I don't want to rule it out altogether. It's just that all of us have to be on the same page and at the table discussing how we move forward here. But to me, it's about the number of days, the kind of productive educational activity that's going on both in the summer and in the schools, so that those young people in Montgomery County that you're talking about, in Prince George's County, don't actually lose both the value of the summer break, but also lose educationally when they come back from summer.
Officials in Prince George's County just submitted a modified proposal for the long-delayed regional medical center, which scales back the project in both size and cost. Your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm pleased to see that. I mean, I do think that, especially after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, that we have to be, over these next couple of decades, moving into an environment where we have much more community-based healthcare and not the big sort of structural projects that we've seen in the past that provide healthcare services. And so this is probably a good move, but also we need to look at models throughout our county and our communities where people are receiving health care in their neighborhoods and communities and with their families that enable them to get the best kind of health care. Again, the concern is about quality of health care, not about structures.
Let's talk voter turnout in November. Donald Trump, and you're an African-American woman, for people who don't know you, don't see on the program here, says to African-Americans and Hispanics that the Democrats have used African Americans for votes and then ignored you, and said most recently in his famous quote, "What the hell do you have to lose by not giving him a chance to be the president of the United States?"
Your life sucks, but go ahead.
And it was mostly white audience. I didn't see any African Americans in the audience, at least the angles that I saw. But what would be your answer? Yes, that your life is terrible.
Well, this has been interesting to observe because, first of all, I think that, Donald Trump has built an entire campaign over this last year of slicing and dicing and dividing on race and religion and gender and ethnicity and all of those lines. And we have everything to lose under a President Trump. I can't even say it. We have everything to lose. And I think as a Democrat, I'm not going to sit here and say that we've done everything right, but our values are in the right place. Our focus is in the right place. And I believe that Hillary Clinton provides the strongest case for leadership that we've perhaps ever had, and choice for leadership that we've ever had, to focus on the needs and concerns of Black and brown families, of education and creating jobs and opportunity, and strengthening families and communities. And Donald Trump is almost the antithesis of that. So I believe that we have everything to lose, which is why we have to have the strongest possible voter turnout. I mean, there is no excuse. My mother's birthday is on November 9th. And so I've promised her, Tom, that I am going anywhere and everywhere so that her birthday present is going to be that she can say President-elect Hillary Clinton.
On to Melanie in Catonsville, Maryland. Melanie, your turn.
Hi. I'm wondering why, because I've seen a couple other states do this, and I'm the daughter of an educator. They turn it into like quarters, like college, like September, October, November. Then they're off all December and half of January. It's kind of like I said, college. Why can't we do that with the kids?
Well,
I mean, I think too much vacation is not good for them. I think they should, if the parents are on top of things, of course they're going to read to them and stuff, but a lot of parents aren't. They're too busy working, trying to, make a living.
Well, here's what Donna Edwards has to say.
Well, as I've said before, I mean, I've been to schools that have gone on trimesters, on quarters, on semesters. The question is, what are we packing into that? And what do we expect young people to learn in that process? And so we need to engage in a discussion about what our expectations are in terms of the learning, but also the number of days that it takes to get that in. And then we can figure out the structure that we need to do that, whether that is from Labor Day until mid-June or it's some other plan.
There are a few events coming up that I know you wanted to mention, including a national app development challenge for students and a college and career fair.
I'm very excited about this. So our 8th annual college and career fair is coming up on October 15th. It starts at 8:30 in the morning with registration at Oxon Hill High School in Oxon Hill. It's open to anyone who's looking for a college, university, or post-high school program. We have, plans in there to do, how to prepare for an SAT, how to, prepare for a college interview, what to look in the job force. And then we also have an app challenge. It's a congressional STEM app challenge so that young people can develop apps of their choice to teach anything it is that they want to do. And then they put them together, we judge them, and we come out with a winner, and the winner's app is posted over at the Capitol. And then lastly, our Service Academy nominations are due on October 17th. And so you got to get those applications in if you want to be considered for a full ride nomination to our Service Academy.
Only have about a minute left.
How
I'm
can
sorry.
someone find out about that? Does an email address or,
So,
or a web address or
they can
your
go
office?
right to my congressional website, which is Donna Edwards at house.gov. And they can get all the information on there or call our office at 301-516-7602. 301-516-7602.
I needed that number again.
Tom, sure, we'll be running out of time very quickly, but Patrick Madden is tweeting that the former OAG lawyer hired to represent Yinka Alau from the Department of General Services has put out a statement saying there's documentary proof contradicting statements made by DC on the firings of those employees. So,
OAG being the Office of the Attorney General.
yes, so they are
I
going
tell you, as I said at the start of this program, this is starting to build. This may be an onion that we are going to peel the layers.
Donna Edwards is the U.S. representative for Maryland's 4th Congressional District, which includes most of Prince George's County, as well as part of Anne Arundel County. Congresswoman Edwards, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck to you in your RV and whatever you plan to do in the future.
Thanks, but you guys can have me back. Good to be with you.
A pick of you announced for Prince George's County Executive will definitely have you back.
That's it for the show today, but remember, there's always more online. Summer comes to its official and unofficial end this weekend, and with rain in the forecast, you've got 3 days left to polish off your summer reading list. Visit kojoshow.org/blog to review the titles our WAMU bookworms recommend. While you're there, check out our archives to catch up on any shows you might have missed. And to ensure you never miss a show again, subscribe to the broadcast via your favorite podcast app. We're off Monday for the holiday, but be sure to meet us back here next Tuesday at noon. We'll be talking about the debate in Maryland over the governor's executive order for a later school start date, sparking debate about economic benefits for one region versus a challenging school calendar. And Georgetown University confronts its slave-owning past with an apology and admission preferences for descendants. Yes, we'll talk about the unprecedented move by the university. That's all coming up next Tuesday at noon. Until then, Tom Sherwood, what are you doing for the Labor Day
Happy
holiday?
Labor Day. I'm going to be not laboring.
What are your plans, Donna Edwards?
Not one single thing.
Yay.
Kick back and enjoy it. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, labor.
I'm Kojo Nandi.